Sophie and Daniel had been best friends for as long as they could remember. They grew up in the same neighborhood, and from their early childhood, they were inseparable. Whether it was building forts out of blankets or riding bikes down the street, they were always together. As they grew older, Sophie realized something about their friendship that made her heart race. She was in love with Daniel. At first, Sophie didn't understand her feelings. She thought it was just admiration for her best friend. But as the years passed, her affection for him deepened. Every time Daniel laughed or smiled, her heart fluttered. She began to notice the little things. The way his hair fell over his eyes, the way his voice sounded when he was excited, and the way he looked at her when they shared a joke. Sophie couldn't stop thinking about him. She loved him, but she didn't know how to tell him. The problem was, Daniel didn't see her the same way. He saw her as his best friend, the person who always had his back. Sophie had always been there for him through everything. She had listened when he talked about his dreams, his worries, and his crushes. She had cheered him on during sports games and helped him study for exams. Sophie loved him, but she didn't know if he could ever love her back. One day, as they sat on their favorite park bench, Sophie stared at Daniel, feeling the weight of her secret. She knew she had to tell him someday, but not today. Not yet. If she told him now, would it ruin everything? Would he look at her differently? Sophie was scared to find out. Everything changed when Daniel met Emma. She was new at school, and she quickly became popular. Emma was beautiful. Her blonde hair and sparkling blue eyes turned heads wherever she went. She was kind and easy to talk to, and it didn't take long for Daniel to fall for her. Sophie watched from the sidelines as Daniel and Emma grew closer. It was painful, more painful than Sophie had imagined. Every time Daniel mentioned Emma's name, her heart sank. She pretended to be happy for him, smiling and encouraging him when he talked about their dates and their plans. But inside, Sophie felt as though she were losing him. The feeling of jealousy was overwhelming. One evening, Daniel invited Sophie to meet at their cafe. He looked excited, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. "I've been thinking, Sophie," he began, stirring his coffee nervously. "I think I'm in love with Emma." Sophie's heart stopped. She smiled at him, but her voice wavered. "That's great, Daniel. I'm really happy for you." But inside, her heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. She wanted to scream, to tell him that she had loved him for years, but the words wouldn't come. Sophie stayed quiet, trying to keep her emotions in check. "I hope she makes you happy," she said softly. Daniel smiled, oblivious to the pain in her voice. He was so happy, and that was all that mattered to him. Sophie felt like she was fading into the background, like she wasn't important anymore. As Daniel's relationship with Emma grew, Sophie began to feel more and more distant. She stopped hanging out with Daniel as much. When they met, their conversations felt awkward. Daniel was so caught up in his new love, and Sophie felt like a third wheel. One afternoon, Daniel called her and invited her to watch a movie. Sophie hesitated. She didn't want to feel like the friend who was always there when things were going wrong. She wanted to be the one he looked at with love, the one he chose above all others. But she agreed, not wanting to lose him completely. When they sat down to watch the movie, Daniel kept checking his phone. He smiled at the messages from Emma and responded quickly. Sophie sat there, pretending not to notice. It hurt more than she had expected. She realized that things between them had changed. Daniel wasn't just her best friend anymore. He was someone else's boyfriend. And that made her feel invisible. Sophie wanted to run away, to escape the pain, but she couldn't. Daniel was still her best friend, and even if he didn't love her back, she didn't want to lose him. She just had to find a way to deal with the heartache. Weeks went by, and Sophie tried to move on. She focused on her studies, hung out with other friends, and kept herself busy. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't forget about Daniel. One evening, Daniel called her again. "Sophie, can we talk?" he asked. His voice sounded strange, almost urgent. Sophie felt her heart race. "Of course," she said, trying to sound calm. They met at their usual spot in the park, the place where they had shared so many memories. This time, Daniel didn't seem as cheerful. His face was tense and his eyes were tired. Sophie sat down next to him, unsure of what was going on. "I don't know how to say this, Sophie," Daniel began, his voice heavy. "I've been thinking about Emma and I don't know. Things aren't the same. I don't feel what I thought I'd feel." Sophie felt a glimmer of hope. Could it be? Could Daniel be having doubts about Emma? "I'm so confused," Daniel continued, rubbing his forehead. "I keep thinking about you, Sophie. I know it's wrong, but I think I've been in love with you for a long time." Sophie's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. This was the moment she had been waiting for. But now she felt terrified. Was this real? Was Daniel really saying that he loved her? "Daniel," Sophie whispered, her voice shaking. "I love you too. I've loved you for so long, but I was too scared to tell you." Daniel reached out and took her hand, his face softening with relief. "I'm so sorry, Sophie. I never meant to hurt you. I was afraid to tell you how I felt, because I didn't want to ruin our friendship." Sophie smiled through her tears. "I was afraid of the same thing, but now we can be honest with each other." From that moment, everything changed. Sophie and Daniel were no longer just best friends. They were a couple. They spent their days together, talking about their future, making plans, and enjoying each other's company. But it wasn't always easy. Daniel had broken up with Emma, and although he felt guilty about it, Sophie knew it was the right decision. Their relationship was new, and they had to figure out how to be together in a different way. There were moments of doubt, moments when they questioned whether they had done the right thing. But every time they looked into each other's eyes, they knew that they had found something real. Sophie no longer had to hide her love for Daniel. She no longer had to pretend to be just his friend. She was the one he loved, and that was enough. They took things slow, learning how to be in a romantic relationship, while holding on to the strong friendship they had always shared. As the months passed, Sophie realized that love doesn't always come easy. Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it means waiting for the right moment. But when love is true, it's worth every second of waiting. Together, Sophie and Daniel knew that they had something special, something they would protect and cherish forever. Tell me in the comments and share this story with your best friend if you love him, and subscribe for more videos.